Hello, my friends. We are live once again. This is Nick, also known as Social Semme. Back to back. Had a great foreign policy conversation last night. On my show, I always love to talk to very smart people about how much we hate the U.S. government and the crimes of the United States government. And I couldn't think of anyone better to do that with than Lee Camp, someone I've been a fan of for a long time, host of Redacted Tonight, host of Government Secrets. I'm very glad that you joined Hampton Leftists. Welcome to the show, Lee.
Thanks for having me. I love your work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I focus on state violence, foreign policy, the class war. That's kind of I think the new left needs to focus on that. That's extremely important. And I was flagging. I had a lot of concerns uh, with like Joe Biden becoming like the leader of the Democratic Party, knowing everything he represented, the fact that he was one of the original authors of the Patriot Act as well, and the vice president who used the Espionage Act more than anyone else. So I had a lot of concerns coming in about the direction the United States is going in terms of ramping up authoritarianism, censorship, and I have to say, Lee, all my worst fears is coming true.
I was going to say, it's not like any of those concerns have proven true, right?
That's the thing. Like, I really wish I could come out here and say things are going great, but it's not. They take advantage of the fact that they gain a lot of political power, mostly because of the progressive movement. Now they're just doing whatever they want. And now we're seeing a suppression of free speech, a crackdown on independent media as well. You even have like the Biden administration, even the FBI, that is trying to get people to snitch on people for having radicalized views. And we saw what the Biden administration see as radical. They listed socialists at the same tier as they listed neo-Nazis. So I don't trust the government to define what is extreme, right?
Right. The FBI tweeted out that, family members are the best people at noticing when someone's, starting to become someone who might create violence or something like that. They're basically asking people to turn in their family members. And what I talked about on Redacted Tonight is the FBI failed to mention that these studies have shown that since 2001, after 9/11, every single this was up through 2012, so maybe it's almost every single at this point, but nearly every single time that there has been a terrorist attack domestically in the United States or an attempted attack that they've stopped, every single time the FBI is somehow involved. They have informants in the room. The informants are usually the ones pushing the more extreme behavior. Sometimes the FBI is actually helping facilitate purchase of like weapons or bomb making materials. In one instance, they actually drove the guy to the like staging area. It's just insane. And they have to create these events in order to justify their existence and say, look, we're stopping the terrorist acts. But like, this is a large study out of Fordham Fordham University, and it shows that they're involved in every single one.
Yeah, and then I always tell people, if you don't know the history of the FBI or the history of the CIA, you don't really know American history at all. Like the amount they are complicit with violence and destruction. And I love that you mentioned in particular, they have to create the events to justify their budgets, to justify their existence. And the shift I see in culture, once again, just another reason I'm terrified with the direction our country is going, is that there's polls that show that you have liberals that are more trustworthy of the CIA and the FBI than Republicans now. So it's crazy how they are able to pull that out. Where you have people who are supposed to be for freedom of thought, for liberation, they are supporting these giant oppressive forces of oppression like the FBI and the CIA.
Yeah, it used to be the reverse, where 20 years ago, where the Republicans claimed to be the party of the military, and the Democrats didn't care about the military, and the party of the FBI, and the Democrats didn't care about the FBI, and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, we now see these two parties stand for the same shit. They are both defending the entrenched capitalist oligarchic system that we have here in the United States. They're both defending the American empire. So whether one of them gives a little show about, maybe decreasing the military budget, or the other one gives a show about, questioning something in the FBI, it doesn't really matter. The two parties stand for the same shit.
Yeah, and there's no concerns with the crimes against humanity that the FBI and the CIA has done, and this is something I highlighted during the Trump years. People always wonder why they couldn't believe that I didn't have Trump derangement syndrome, and I'm not gonna have Trump derangement syndrome when he just one of many. Like that's how I've seen him as one as many, and if you look at what liberal outrage against Trump was, they say, "Oh, he's a tyrant who don't respect free speech and freedom of the press." Meanwhile, as I mentioned earlier before, you had Biden and Barack Obama who led a historic campaign against journalists like Julian Assange. So it's like, how can I have Trump derangement syndrome on someone who is just repeating and following the precedent of the neoliberal political establishment, right?
Yeah, just this week, Biden's press secretary, Jen Psaki, said that the Biden administration is telling Facebook who to censor, who to shut down. And it's really repulsive that they now admit that kind of thing, because they're not afraid of any kind of ramifications for the government to say, hey, yeah, the largest form of communication that average Americans have, one of the largest forms, we're just telling people how to censor it and where to shut it down. And it's kind of terrifying that they don't even fear admitting that nowadays. But for
The
people,
liberals are cheered on. They actually think it's like the liberal crowd. They think it's a great thing.
yeah. For people who think that Trump was the one who shut down the media, which, Trump would have shut down all the media that's negative towards him if he could. But at the same time, you have Biden and the liberals looking to cancel anybody who's outside of the allowable corporate talking points.
Yeah. So what do you call that when there's like a merger of corporate powers and government powers that control the dissemination of information? That's fascism. Like, that's literally one of the core tenets of fascism. When you have giant corporations, especially people who have pretty much locked down everything, like Google and Facebook and Twitter, they have monopolies on the flow of information online, and they're coordinating with the government. That's corporate fascism if I ever seen it.
Yeah, it's a form of fascism, and a political philosopher Sheldon Wolin titled it or termed it inverted totalitarianism. Whereas totalitarianism has its power in the hands of kind of a singular strongman figure, the inverted totalitarianism that we live under, the power is in the hands of the anonymous corporate state. So you which is, basically the unity between the state and corporate America. And it's difficult to point to who it is that's oppressing you half the time, because, is it Joe Biden, or is it something being done by YouTube shutting down content, or is it something being done by Amazon, allowing police departments across the nation to spy on you with your Ring doorbells? They have deals with most police departments to use those to spy on people. So, you look at this and people don't really know where to point in terms of what it is, who it is that's oppressing them. But that is kind of a new system we're under, rather than this one singular horrific strongman. It is corporate inverted totalitarianism.
And then people have this false notion that they are doing this because they want to stop misinformation. Like, there's people that are really convinced that's why they're doing it. That's funny, isn't it?
The largest perpetrators of misinformation for decades, but the past 4 years has really been spectacular, with Russiagate, which has completely collapsed, with the Syrian chemical attacks that 4 whistleblowers have now revealed were bullshit. With so many things that help and prop up the American empire. The disinformation about Venezuela, the disinformation about China. A large report came out this week by Italy showing that U.S. claims of genocide in China are completely fake. So it's like, this is the largest group of misinformation agents in the world, in a lot of ways, meaning the Biden administration or our government in general. And they are pointing to others and saying, we need to stop misinformation.
Leak, did anyone who pushed Russiagate Did any one of those people, did they lose their Twitter page? Did they lose their
Yeah.
Facebook? Did they lose their Facebook page? The people who push lies about weapon of mass destruction, all those people, they don't get taken down. It's the anti-war pages who get taken down. So it always cracks me up when people actually give faith in these unelected oligarchs and that work represent Google, Facebook, and Twitter, and they want them to control the flow of information. That does not make sense. Like, well, I don't. It doesn't make any sense why anyone advocate for that. And now they are coordinating with the government, who I mentioned before. They go after the people who actually speak truth to power and call out war crimes. Like you have people like Julian Assange who are punished for exposing the U.S. war crimes. And there was a bombshell story that just came out. A key evidence was admitted to be
Witness.
fabricated.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone who continue to repeat that, are they going to lose their Facebook pages? No.
Yeah, the key witness, the kind of the only remaining shred of evidence against Assange was this key witness, Siggy Thordarson, who is a convicted and known fraudster, pedophile, and a diagnosed sociopath. And anyway, yeah, what you're mentioning, just a couple of weeks ago in an interview, he said he made up his accusations against Assange to help the FBI in order to get off of his charges with the FBI. So, big surprise, the FBI pushed him to make shit up about Assange so that they could have something to arrest Assange on. And now he's admitted it. And from our mainstream media, you get nothing. It is a media blackout on this.
Yeah, and that's another way that they engage in propaganda. When I say the United States is the most propagandized country, it also based on what they don't report, because it was crickets when you hear this story. They absolutely control what people think, what information that is being revealed. And I know you guys are discussing this as well. I'm looking into Daniel Hale, who is getting one of the most brutal convictions using the Espionage Act, because he just uncovered the amount of people who were killed by drone strikes. This says the United States government seeks harshest sentence ever in leak case against drone whistleblower. So, do you want to explain the situation that coming out from Daniel Hale?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know the name Daniel Hale. They know some of the other whistleblowers like Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden, but Daniel Hale is definitely an important one. He came forward. He was in the military, came forward and revealed a lot about our drone program, our completely illegal war criminal drone program. He revealed that the military themselves, in their own analysis, say that over 90% of those killed by drone bombs are innocent civilians. That's our own military saying that. He revealed that they're often murdering people because, the drones are piloted. A lot of people don't know drones are piloted by, a 19-year-old sitting at a desk often in Tampa, Florida, or in Las Vegas is where the two big centers are. And they're looking at a screen, and often what they have, the drone is, miles in the air where it can't be seen. And what they have is a grainy, sometimes infrared image of something. Of a guy walking, but you can hardly even see it's a guy, a person. And they'll look at that. And Daniel Hare revealed that they're dropping bombs on people based on things like their gait, meaning how they walk, because they can't verify that these people are anybody. So they go off of, that guy walks pretty similar to the guy that we said is a terrorist. So we should just drop a bomb on that guy because it's probably him. And so he revealed stuff like that. This is stuff American people should know because we're supposedly in a democracy. We're not really, but people think we are. And
they're so adorable, aren't they?
They are so cute. They're so cute. And so we have to be informed to make these decisions about our lawmakers and what we want our government doing and what we want it doing in our name and the blood that's going to be on our hands for the deaths that are the result of this type of behavior. And so Daniel Hale revealed this to the world. And what did they do? Of course, they arrest him. They don't arrest the war criminals dropping the bombs. They don't arrest the generals ordering the dropping of the bombs. They arrest the guy who revealed it. Same with our torture program, our completely illegal, against the Geneva Conventions torture program. John Kiriakou, CIA officer, revealed that it was going on. And he was the only person ever put in prison for the torture program, the guy who revealed it.
And I see they're using the Espionage Act once again to go after people who reveal these very important information. And I reported this on my show as well. A lot of people know it always drove me crazy whenever I saw like people pretend that Trump is a little bit anti-war when he wasn't. Trump actually rolled back a lot of regulations when it comes to reporting on drone strike murders. So I always tell people, like, when you have the U.S. empire and their goal, you're not gonna have one clown in a suit that's gonna change that. They just fall. The U.S. empire follows a certain path and certain road. That's why you see Trump continuing the wars that Obama started. Obama expanding the war George Bush started. They are the puppet heads and the figureheads of the U.S. empire, which show why they didn't like Trump, because he wasn't a good representative of the U.S. empire. He kind of gave the game away too many times, and they don't like
Right.
Kamala because she's doing the same thing. Where they just admit like, oh yeah, we're in the Middle East because we want the oil. Well, Kamala like, yeah, we fight war for oil. Now we're gonna fight oil for water. Like, are you guys saying the quiet part out loud now? Is that bad?
Yeah,
But
she made that mistake, but I'm sure they'll get her in line. But I mean, you're making a great point with Trump. I mean, look, he was a war hawk. I don't want anyone to pretend that he was Mr. Peaceful. He dropped in Obama's final year, they dropped 26,000 drone bombs. His military did. In Trump's first year, they dropped 40,000 bombs. So Trump was a war hawk. He was killing a lot of people. However, there were a few moments here and there where Trump tried to create peace. And I'm sure he did it for all the wrong reasons. I'm sure he did it because he wanted his name on it or because he thought it would help with voters. He didn't do it because he cares about people. But for whatever reason, he tried to create peace, for example, with North Korea. And when he tried to do that, the military-industrial complex kicked into high gear to make sure that could never happen. Pompeo jumped in, Bolton jumped in. They made sure to torpedo any talks that could create peace with North Korea, a country we're technically still at war with from the Korean War, a war in which we killed a third of their population. We killed a third of their people. That's insanity. And yet we can't create peace with them. And another time was when Trump said he was pulling the troops twice out of Syria, he said. And then they said, oh, chemical attack, we have to bomb. And he fell for it. And then in Afghanistan, he said, we're pulling the troops out of Afghanistan and Germany. And then they said, oh, Russia's paying the Taliban to kill our troops. Turned out to be completely false. It all fell apart, that story, but it served its purpose. It stopped Trump from withdrawing the troops.
yeah, and Trump was a guy who was not driven by ideology at all. So when you look at everything that Trump did, it's obvious that he was simply just trying to one up Obama.
His ideology was Trump.
His ideology was Trump and one-upping Obama, because I believe the only reason why he was even discussing peace with North Korea, because he wanted to say, oh yeah, I established peace with North Korea when Obama did it.
Yeah.
So he would do stuff like that.
Yeah,
exactly, Lee. He would do stuff like that, but because Trump didn't really stand for anything, it was easy for like the generals to talk him out of stuff. There's always been those leaks and reports where Trump will have this idea that they deem crazy, but we deem a great idea, and then the generals just talk to him, and then he was like, oh yeah, okay, never mind, not that big a deal, because at the end of the day, Trump wanted to be loved by the establishment. That's why he ran in the first place. He wanted to be get his part in the club. He got it, the right wing club, that is. But that's what he really wanted. And I'm glad you brought up like North Korea, because that shows how bloodthirsty liberals are. Like, there was a poll that was done where the American people said we should nuke North Korea. Like, how bloodthirsty and propagandized American people. So these people, they have done nothing.
What have they? And what? You're angry at them for being hungry? Like, is that?
So they say, this is what they say. Like, and they say this with a straight face. They're like, oh well, the North Korea is ruled by a tyrant that is brutalizing his people. So our answer to that is to brutalize their people. Like, that doesn't make sense.
It's insanity. And Rex Tillerson, when he was Secretary of State under Trump, he said it in public. You can go watch the video. He was at some conference or something, and he said, we know the sanctions against North Korea are working because their fishermen are working so hard, or out on the ocean so hard, working so hard because they are lacking food, that the fishermen starve to death and their bodies wash up in South Korea. And Rex Tillerson pointed to that as proof that our sanctions were working, that poor, desperate fishermen were dying. To him, that is a successful sanctions campaign.
Yeah, and that's something that people need to discuss. I talked to it with Kareem Batesh and Asad Raw. Economic warfare is warfare. Sanctions is an act of war, and that's what you're gonna see consistent throughout the course of the United States empire. And yeah, I just like the people. Americans are just so zombified by propaganda. The fact that they have this vendetta and they want to harm the North Korean people for what? Like, and then they always say, "Oh, North Korea is a extremely authoritarian." Okay, whatever. Whatever you want to say about the country, whatever. But I want you to acknowledge this. Will you acknowledge this, guys? That North Korea spends 3 times less on the military than the NYPD does on their police budget alone.
Yeah.
So can we be consistent here on terms of ideology? Go ahead, Lee.
Whenever people act like upset, like, oh, I hate I hate Cuba because it's socialist, and my point's like, okay, let's just suspend disbelief and say, okay, you despise socialism. It's just awful. It's the worst. Oh my God, I hate it. What does their system have to do with you? What does it matter how they do their shit? Like, being upset about that and thinking we need to kill people because of that, it'd be like if you said, you hated cock rings and you just knowing that they exist has ruined your marriage. Like, what's it got to do with you?
And that's why if you're American, especially if you're American, you need to criticize the United States, because what is the good in me focusing on Russia and North Korea or China or any of these countries? Because there's no inherent power for me to change those countries. The only place you have power to change is the country where you can actually get something done and put pressure on the leaders. So when you actually fall for the North Korea fear mongering, when you fall for the fear mongering against Russia, against Venezuela, or the other country, and you focus on criticizing them, you got to think about what you are doing. You are inherently justifying the propaganda of U.S. imperialism, because as an American, if you back up the propaganda, that means you are saying inherently that we must get involved. And that what Chomsky lied out. So Chomsky said, he said, the reason why I focus on criticizing my country, because this is something I can do something about. So if you're focusing on criticizing another country, what is the implication of what you're saying?
Yeah, and people like ask me like, well, China did this thing, and why aren't you talking about that? Or something happened in Russia, and why aren't you talking about that? And it's like, you're getting that 24/7 on CNN.
Yeah.
That's not what I do and not what I care about. I care about America and our policies and what we're doing. And on top of that, we are the most powerful country in the world, for better or worse. So perhaps it's more important to criticize this country than to, be like, well, in Cuba, they're not allowed to admit that. Like,
yeah, like we have 1/4 of the world's prison population. And they want us to be fear mongering over China and Russia. I mentioned before, the North Korea, they spend 3 times less on their military than we do in one city, New York. The NYPD spends. So I want people to get serious about these issues and what we are advocating for. And this is another reason why we got to continue to debunk the propaganda, because I cover on the show, I have covered this ever since last summer, the explosion in support and popularity of defunding the police. Now, I know what some people are thinking, because they may have got information from other sources. Well, I thought the corporate media said defund the police is dying, because there is a propaganda push.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you noticed it. I'll report on my show, but across all media, where they are trying to paint, it's manufacturing consent, right? Where they want to paint the defund the police movement as dead, unreasonable. Hey, look, Eric Adams won in New York, so you guys should give up on this. I want to let you guys know they're doing that because they are definitely afraid. Because
go ahead, Lee. It grew because so with the Black Lives Matter protest, the media started to give them coverage. A, because it got too big to ignore, and B, because it was useful for a lot of our mainstream media to cover BLM in order to harm Trump. But now that Biden's in office, it's no longer useful, and they're scared that they've created kind of a fervor, a movement, a surge in this country that they can't control to actually bring the police into account and to defund them and to change how policing in America works. So because of their fear of that, they've created this recent, like you say, manufacturing consent for police. And acting like defund police is crazy. I mean, there's Democrats on TV now where they're asked about defund police and they go, nobody's talking about defunding the police. And meanwhile, half of the audience watching that on TV is going, I'm talking about defunding the police.
55% of independents are supportive of defunding the police right now. And there's been a lot of polls, and the headlines they have done amazing jujitsu and figuring out a way on not reporting that. But this has been consistent in multiple polls. They've been showing this because we are in the right. Like, how can you justify giant police budgets that do not reduce crime? And I don't get too obsessed over labels, but I think they're pretty fun to talk about. I consider myself a libertarian socialist, anarchist, where essentially government that justifies itself. This is why I support Medicare for All, because Medicare for All is inherently a program that justifies itself because it boosts wages, boosts the economy. It saves 68,000 lives per year. When you look at canceling student loan debt is a program that inherently justifies itself because that boosts the economy, right? Government that justifies itself. Now, I dare any conservative, and then no one ever explained this to me, how they're spending all this money on police budgets. American police will be the third ranked military budget if you ranked it that way worldwide. Despite the fact that there's increased crime, they're not doing anything to decrease crime. So the corporate media, this is what they would do. They will say, oh, there is a spike in crime, so we must fund the police more. And then when there's no crime, they'll say, oh, see, we dropped the crime rate, so this is why we should fund the police more. You see how they never lose?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And it also, in this discussion, which you will never see on your mainstream media by design, this is how they keep people inside the Overton window, inside that window of allowable discussions. Step one of this entire conversation is let's define crime. Does the big pharma pushing opioids that kill 30,000 people a month in America, does that count as crime? Oh, no, that's not crime. Okay. Does stealing people's homes like the big banks do, millions of foreclosures that they can't even prove they own the house and they're just stealing it from people, does that count as crime? No, that's not stealing someone's home. That's not crime. Is it when you're taking trillions of dollars from average workers across America and filtering it up to a tiny number of billionaires on Wall Street? Is that crime? No, that's not crime. That's not crime. When all of these people and these corporations avoid taxes, they put them in tax havens. They use the loopholes. So massive corporations paying zero in taxes like Amazon. Does that count as crime? No, that's not crime. Well, what's crime? Oh, it's a guy that broke a window. It's a guy that was standing on the corner because he was loitering. It's a guy walking with an open beer. That's real crime. Like, the discussion begins in a faulty place, in an incorrect place, by acting like crime is only a guy on the street, punching someone or raping someone or something. But there are so many types of crime and so much larger crime being done by the ruling elite that is never even acknowledged, never even discussed as if it's crime.
I love that point. I love that point so much, Lee, because I will use something similar because there are people that always say, oh, you got black people that are extremely violent. Those racist people that say black people are violent. I'm like, it's not us who destabilized the Middle East. Like, come on. It's not us who had kids and kids. So that's similar argument to what I use because the same people.
I'd like to see one group of American black guys kill 1 million people in Iraq. I don't think it was.
Yeah, so I used to use that same argument because I'm like, bro, how you guys claim black people are violent? You got cops killing thousands of people a year. Like, you guys are literally, but that's okay violence because that's white people approve state violence. But it's the same for the police because they are responsible for stealing more material goods for the working class than burglars do with civil asset forfeiture. And that's what the police is. And a lot of black people in our community understand that. But this is how I went over the holdouts. Like, whenever you have the more conservative minorities, even the people who not think about this issue properly, I asked them, like, what do you think the police doing? They're not reducing crime. They are siphoning wealth from our communities through civil asset forfeiture, through regressive fines, regressive taxes and fees, because they steal more money than criminal burglars do. But they want to say that we're violent, that we're the criminals, right?
Yeah. And so something I like to push these ideas that aren't allowed on your mainstream media, and one of them is, and I did a long bit on it on my stand-up special, which anyone can watch at leecamp.american.com. But in my stand-up special, I talk about how we should get rid of 99% of police, and I then go through just about everything police do, what they really do out on the streets, and I talk about how each one, if you really tick them off, what they do shouldn't be done by police. If you're talking about, traffic stops or telling people they can't loiter or what, like that shouldn't be done by police. That if you really wanted to catch someone for speeding and give them a little ticket, then have special speeding patrols that go and give people tickets and don't have guns and aren't cops. There's no reason to give a guy a gun to deal with someone who's got a brake light out. It's barbaric and insane. But the reason it's done that way is because this is in order to have a mass fascist police force on the streets all over the place in case it's needed to defend the ruling elite, to defend the property of the ruling elite. So really, these things that they do all day, I mean, 90% of what they do is stand around and annoy people and harass people and see if they can create a reason to arrest people. 99% of them shouldn't exist. Everything they do could be done by other jobs that are not people with guns, not people that have been trained in brutality, holding tasers and pepper spray and everything else. And then there is a tiny percentage of things like, active terrorist moments in the country, active mass shootings. There's a tiny percentage where you need something that is similar to a police officer, someone with a gun to actually go deal with this shit. But it is a tiny percentage. I mean, if a great book on this is Alex Vitale's The End of Police or The End of Policing. I think it's called The End of Police. But Alex Vitale's done great work on this, Vitale. Most of what police do is perpetrate the completely illegal, should be illegal, drug war against our own citizens and protect the property of the rich against people standing up and fighting back. So, the policing in this country is completely misunderstood.
Yeah, and your arguments is so on point, and people once explain this, they understand. We are hit with so much propaganda. People don't even think about these issues. And another example, you have a lot of people, the vast majority of American people, support ending the drug war. And this is why I get liberals all the time. They say, "Oh, I support ending the drug war." If you support ending the drug war, why don't you support defunding the police? Right. Why do you think the police budget exploded in the 80s? I'm just asking for intellectual consistency. And I love how you point this out. I'll bring this up and then we can wrap up here. This is a tweet of yours, and which kind of highlights the absurdity of our police system. I just want to bring this up and then we can wrap up here. You say a cop has been sentenced to 12 years in prison after he was caught planting meth on at least 67 innocent people. This is not just one bad apple who's been caught. This is a rare moment when an officer has been punished for the criminality that is very common in the U.S. police.
Yeah.
And I saw this tweet that hit hard because there's always these stories and they are presented as like good stories, like good move stories where they're like, yeah, there's this black man who was serving 45 years in prison. Now he's been released. And those stories are always presented as like good feeling stories. Right. And then white people love it. Like, yeah, white people, yeah, he's free. And I'm horrified. Like right. when I read those stories, like, yo, that could be me. Like that's me at 75. So how many of these people are still in prison now? Like that's the concept that blows me away. So I want you to talk on that and then we can wrap from there.
Yeah, the police system is designed to just succeed in locking people up. It doesn't matter whether they are actually did anything, whether they have the wrong guy. The goal that, they lie in court. It's well known that police lie in court to try and get people convicted. The prosecutors want them to lie in court to get people convicted because the prosecutors want to get people convicted because it looks good for them. I went and watched my sister-in-law in a court case in New York City where the DNA had proven that the guy was innocent. He'd already spent 3 years in prison. He was at a mistrial. First one was a mistrial. So this is the second trial. The DNA and the eyewitness can't point to the correct guy. The DNA that they wouldn't allow in the court proves it's not him. And the prosecutor went forward with the trial, knowing
Wow.
all of that, because the prosecutor just wanted the win. I mean, it was insane. But this is quite common. And another thing that just came out last week, which speaks to this, is a 27-year police veteran has become a whistleblower and said that he actually trained cops on how to lie on their paperwork when they're filling out an incident report, how to lie on it to make it sound like they were heroes and the suspects or the victims, if they killed someone or beat someone, were, horrible, hardened criminals. And he taught them what words to use, how to make it sound worse for the suspect, better for the cop. Like, these are training sessions on how to lie on these police reports. And this stuff is all so common, so aggressively common. It's not, so when someone like that cop gets sentenced to years in jail for planting meth on someone, it is the exception that proves the rule. That is the rare moment. In Baltimore, it came out a couple of years ago that the cops regularly kept toy guns in their car in case they needed to drop the gun on a guy they had just killed and say he had a gun. Like, that was common practice. So, I mean, it's just insane that this stuff is so common, and it's our policing system. There is no accountability for all this shit.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Lee, because you always bring it, and the arguments that we are made is that we making exactly why we are starting to see the tide shift, where people have been brainwashed into thinking that these fascist pigs in uniform protects them, even though they just arrive at the crime after the case. So it never makes sense at face value, but people are starting to understand the role of police really is just to protect capital. They're not here to stand with the people. So we've got to continue to talk, have these conversations, and advocate and break the mindset of these giant police budget advocates, because that's what they are. They're just advocates for giant police budgets, and that does not make sense. But anyway, I appreciate you coming on, Lee. I'll stay a little bit afterwards, guys. So I'll head out. I answer some questions, and apparently Biden bombing again. I've been off. I've been offline most of the day, honestly, but I saw a comment. I saw people talk on Twitter. Apparently Biden dropped more bombs, so we probably go over that here soon. But anyway, is there anything else that you want to plug? Anything else you want to promote, Lee?
Yeah, I just wanted to plug something real quick. We're all facing incredible suppression. Channels are being demonetized. The co-host of my podcast, Government Secrets, had his channel demonetized after we covered the JFK assassination. My channels are incredibly suppressed. Just 4 years ago, I was getting, hundreds of thousands of views per video. Now it's down to a tiny fraction of that. So I created this site, which you're showing right now, called radindiemedia.com. And it features some of your stuff too, or it will be, and Fred Hampton Leftists stuff. But the main point, it doesn't make any, it's not meant to make any money. There's no ads on it or anything. And if you click on any of these things, it goes straight to the content. It's not meant to keep you on my site. And the goal is that if this is a place people just check every day, then if my YouTube channel gets deleted, or someone's YouTube channel gets suppressed, or your Facebook page gets suppressed from these great content creators, you'll still have a place to go and find their stuff. So we have everything the Gray Zone puts up, everything Abby Martin puts up, some stuff from Jimmy Dore, everything Mint Press puts up. And so it's kind of a place where people can just see all this awesome shit. And it should, if it were to keep growing, basically make it harder to suppress us, because people would have a place to go and see all this content, no matter how much YouTube tries to shut it down. So that's called radindiemedia.com, RAD, like radical, radindiemedia, INDIE media. And if you sign up for the email and everything, we'll keep you updated on everything.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting. I love looking at new different sources for information. So I know I'll definitely probably use this, because this is very important. I talk about it all the time here. We are a new media space, and we've been throttled. If it wasn't for my Twitter following, luckily I have almost 60,000. If it wasn't for that, there'd be no way. There'd be no way to start off, and I can't imagine how anyone can do it without that or any kind of boost outside otherwise, because the shutdown on independent media is so
Yeah,
intense.
and if you it sucks, but if you guys had been doing what you're doing right now, I'd say like 8 to 10 years ago, I mean,
Yeah.
you'd have easily tens of thousands of views on every video, but YouTube has carefully made it so that that's just not happening anymore.
Yeah, I know. Like when I would search our videos out by the title, and they'd be hard to find.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
can only imagine what people who not like subscribing and all that stuff is like. But anyway, thank you, Lee, for coming on. It was a fantastic conversation. We can go all day, but I'll let you go. Make sure you guys stick around. I'm gonna answer some of the questions I didn't get to. But thank you for joining the show once again, Lee. Big fan.
Keep fighting. Talk soon.
Take care, man.